This is CIT 1121 Packet Tracer 1175 subnetting exercise. In this exercise, you're going to subnet the /24 network 192.168.100.0/24, and you're going to break it down into 5 networks. 4 of those networks require 25 hosts each. One of those networks, the one in between the routers, requires 2 hosts. So we'll variably subnet those spaces. We're going to be asked to configure router 1, switch 3, and PC4, and we'll do it in that order. Before we get started, I am going to notate a little bit here, so I'm going to go ahead and write in the network that they want us to subnet and the usable space in the 4th octet that they want us to use. So starting with 192.168.100.0/24, that gives us the usable space of 0 through 255, which is great for one network. However, we have 5 networks, 4 of which need 25 hosts. So the best size network that we can utilize for 25 hosts would be a network size that is a 32 total addresses large. And 32 total addresses large, we're just going to go ahead and use the first 32 addresses. So that's going to be 192.168.100.0/27 is a subnet mask. That's going to give us that space. And then the 4th octet, that means that we're going to be utilizing addresses 0 through 31. So if I use those addresses there, I can't use those addresses anyplace else. I'm basically telling my router, look, this network's only 32 addresses big. So if there's anything that falls within the numbers of between 0 and 31, it would forward out interface G0/0 here for this particular space. But I can't utilize any of those addresses on any of the other subnets that I've got. I basically have reserved the first 32 addresses. Now, in this second network, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to reserve the second 32 addresses. And those would be 192.168.100.32. That's going to be a /27. And those addresses would be between 32 and 63. The third block of addresses that we're going to use would be right after that. So it would be 192.168.100.64 through 95. That would be the next, whoops, we'll do this right, 64/27. And on the next line, we'll do the same thing, 64 through 95. And the 4th block for 32 addresses would be 192.168.100.96/27, and the 4th octet for that would be 96 through 127 total address space. Great. Now, those 4 blocks are done. That's basically taken up half of our space. So we had from 0 to 255. We've now used from 0 to 127. We've used 128 of the 256 addresses. We do have one more network that we have to keep track of, and that's this network over here between our routers. And this network is a point-to-point. There's only 2 addresses that are necessary, the one for S000 on router 1 and an address for S000 on router 2. Easy enough. So we're going to make this network a little bit smaller than 32. We can make it as small as 4 addresses total because we can't use the network ID and we can't use the broadcast ID. So the addressable space that's left, I mean, we could pick any network we wanted between 128 up through 252. But let's just use the next address. So 192.168.100.128. And we'll make this a /30. And a /30 will give us a network size of 4 addresses. And that's going to be 128 to 131. So R1 is going to end up with address 129, and R2 is going to end up with address 130 when we get to that point. Okay? All right, good. All right, that's the breakdown of the addressable space that they're asking us to do. Now, we're only going to configure some of the devices. So we're going to configure router 1, we're going to configure switch 3, and we're going to configure PC4. The instructions say this: take router 1 and utilize the first available address in any given subnet for that network. So we got 3 networks. We've got 192.168.100.0, 192.168.100.32, and 192.168.100.128. The first available address is just going to be 1 greater than the network ID. So G0/0 is going to be 192.168.100.1. G0/1 is going to be 192.168.133. And serial 000 is going to be 192.168.100.129. And we'll put in the correlating subnet mask, and we'll do no shutdowns, and we'll be done with this router. So let's go ahead and work on that. So I'm going to open the router space up and go to CLI. Go ahead and enter EN for privilege mode and global config with the config T. And we're ready to go. So we're going to go INT G0/0 IP address 192.168.100.1. That would be the first address in that first space. And that mask is going to be 255, 255, 255, 224, because that is the mask that correlates to a network size. It's 32 addresses large. Should be good there. We got a little points there, and we'll do a no shut on that interface, and it goes into a no shut space. Cool. All right, let's switch over to interface G0/1, and that is on the second subnet. So we're going to INT G0/1 IP address 192.168.100.33. 33 would be the first address in that space. Same mask because it's the same size of network. So that's going to be a 224 again. And we'll do a no shut on that. And that should get us into an up space. And we're looking good. And let's do serial 000. So first address in serial 00, INT as 0/0/0. 100.129. 255, 255, 255, 252 this time because it's a very small network. Most of the digits in the subnet mask have been assigned to the network side. Only 2 digits left for host, and we should be pretty good there. I'll do another shut on that, and that's pretty great. And we're done with our router. Good. Okay, now for the switch. All the switches are off limits except for switch 3. And in switch 3, what they want us to do is set up an IP address on VLAN 1. And that would be the second available address in your space. So switch 3 here, we go over to the space that we've assigned. That's 192.168.100. We've got 64 here as the network ID. So the router interface would be 65. The switch would be 66. So let's go ahead and set that up as 66. And since the router is 65, our default gateway would be 65. So let's add those commands in. I'm just going to leave this right below the network that we're looking at. Config T, INT, VLAN 1. We're going to tell you to put the IP address on interface VLAN 1 up until the next class. So just be aware of that. So interface VLAN 1, it's a virtual interface we're going to use if we wanted to program the router. So if we wanted to gain access to the interface through an IP address, this is how we would do it. So we IP address 192.168.100.second available 66. Subnet mask is going to be the same. It's consistent amongst the network. So 10.60, 100.66, 255, 255, 255, 224. Let's do a no shut. Turn that bad boy up. And let's exit out of here and let's put in the default gateway. It makes perfect sense. The default gateway should be underneath the interface, but it's not. It's in a global space. So from global config, type in IP default gateway. And we're going to put in the IP address that the router would be using. That'd be 192.168.100.65 for this particular network. And we should be in pretty good space there. Do an exit there. And we're done with switch 3. Cool. Let's take a look at PC4. So PC4 is the next piece of equipment that we're going to configure. It is going to use the last address in the space that we've assigned it. The last available address would be 126. 127 would be the broadcast ID. So 126 would be the address that we would use for this particular PC. So desktop IP configuration. Let's go ahead and write that in. 126 is, we said the address is going to be 255, 255, 255. Subnet mask has to be consistent with 32 addresses. So that's going to be a 224. And the default gateway is going to be the address that we would have assigned to the router. And the router would get the first address in this space, which is between 96 and 127. So the first available address is actually 97. And that's pretty much a wrap on how to complete 1175.